Welcome back to the Britt Mayer Show, where we talk about culture, politics, faith, and health, and the stories that matter most to you. And we talk about them with zero filter. I'm your host, Britt Mayer. I'm an independent journalist, and I am here in California bringing you the stories and the voices that matter most. And today I am joined once again by Congressman Kevin Kiley of California's 3rd District. He's a former high school English teacher, Yale Law graduate, and now one of the leading voices in Congress on government oversight, fraud, and accountability. Now, since our last interview, Congressman Kiley has been at the center of some of the most explosive debates in California politics, from billions in alleged fraud to a proposed wealth tax on billionaires to a redistricting battle that could reshape his own political future. Just last week, he questioned whistleblower Nick Shirley in a House Judiciary hearing, who testified that fraud in California may be even worse than the Minnesota scandal. Congressman Kevin Kiley is going to break everything down for you that you need to know right now about the state of California. You are going to love this conversation. It is hard-hitting and fast-paced. Share it with all of your California friends because there is so much covered in this short little episode for you. Afterward, make sure that you check out the show notes where you can find out how to follow Kevin and everything that he is doing. He is one of the best in Congress, especially for our really suffering state of California. He's doing the good work out there. So with no further ado, here is my conversation with Kevin Kiley. We've made it into January, which means all of those New Year's resolutions are about to hit. And one of the most common resolutions is to get healthier. So what if I told you there's a really easy, practical way to make your home still just as beautiful, to smell just as good, but way less toxic? An easy transition is to pick up resistance candles. These have become my absolute favorite. They are not only absolutely beautiful, they are clean, made in the USA with coconut apricot wax. No soy, no toxins. You get a really clean burn. All of their candles are paraben-free, phthalate-free, which are two things that I always watch for when it comes to ingredients. And not only that, but they smell so good. I can't get enough of them. So if one of your New Year's resolutions is to be more health conscious this year, a really easy transition is to switch from whatever you're burning in your house to resistance candles. Head to resistancecandles.com and use code ROOTEDWINGS for an exclusive discount. Kevin Kiley, thank you so much for joining us again. You're becoming a frequent guest on this show, and I'm so thankful because you keep us very alert about what is happening in California. So let's talk about on Wednesday, the 21st, you questioned whistleblower Nick Shirley in a House Judiciary hearing. And for those who aren't familiar with Nick Shirley, you should be. He has been doing an incredible job, the work of hundreds of journalists in exposing fraud out in Minnesota, which really kind of was this cataclysmic event that put into motion everything that we are seeing out in Minneapolis right now. But he said that fraud in California may be even worse than the Minnesota scandal. He pointed to $24 billion in homelessness spending with no clear accounting, while homelessness in California keeps rising. So just casually first, and then we'll get into it. What stood out to you most in that exchange with Nick Shirley?
Well, he just seemed to get it right away, which is that when you look at what's happened in California, and the fraud is just everywhere, and it exists on a scale that you don't see anywhere else in the country. I mean, we already know about the 32 billion in unemployment fraud that happened during COVID. We know that community college applications, a third of them are fake and are just used for financial aid fraud. But then you look at things like the homeless situation, where you spend $24 billion. The state auditor says they don't know where the money went, and homelessness gets worse. Or the high-speed rail, where they've spent $18 billion and built nothing. No track has been laid over the course of 17 years. And so when you spend that much money and have absolutely nothing to show for it, it raises a lot of questions. And, I think that you're going to find that there's a lot of misuses of those funds. You've already had several indictments for homelessness spending-related fraud, and I think you're going to see a lot more.
Yeah, going into the high-speed rail, because I saw you post that let me just pull this up real quick because I thought that this was important for those who have been paying attention to this high-speed rail situation. You posted yesterday that the California high-speed rail is the biggest public infrastructuring failure in U.S. history. And you said that we have just passed legislation to make it ineligible for any further federal funding. The train was supposed to be done by 2020, yet after 17 years and $17 billion, there's still no track. Okay, that's funny. Like, we can laugh about it and be like, aha, that's so funny. It's the train to nowhere. But that's also our hard-earned money. So where is this money going?
Right. That's what we need to find out. And the good news is that, as I said there, we're not going to see any of our federal taxpayer dollars going into this just, money pit anymore. We're going to make sure that our federal transportation dollars going forward are used on roads, alleviating traffic, things that will actually make a difference in the lives of Californians. Of course, there's billions more in state funding that's going to continue for now. But I do think we need to start looking into whether there might be some things that go beyond mere waste when it comes to this project. So I asked the FBI director, Kash Patel, to take a look at that as well.
Well, can you give us any feedback on that conversation?
Oh, well, I wrote him a letter and I asked him about it, and he said that if they can find fraud, they're going to investigate. So
Good, good. Well, talking about fraud, you've called Newsom the quote fraud king and California the quote fraud capital. So Newsom, just as Newsom or the people who speak for Newsom always do, they're just saying, bring it on to the investigations. We've got nothing to hide. So you brought up something really interesting too. And I'm going to refer back because you're so active on social media. And I appreciate that because it keeps us informed. But you shared a story that just many of us may have seen. Let me pull it up real quick. Okay. Fox News reported that the title was End of the Road. Officials seize a man's 125K Range Rover after he was arrested for allegedly stealing millions in taxpayer funds meant to house and feed the homeless in Los Angeles. And you retweeted this story and said, this is odd. I was assured by Governor Gavin Newsom just last week that, quote, there is no lost homelessness funding and that, quote, all funds are accounted for. So you are the antagonist of Gavin Newsom on social media, and you're also fighting in Congress. So with this, where should the Trump administration start first when it comes to truly getting to the root of the fraud in California?
oh my gosh, they can start anywhere, and I'm sure they'll find a lot of it. But we've actually already started. So we've stopped the money for high speed rail. We have seen several federal indictments when it comes to homelessness. When it comes to the community college fraud, we've gotten new identity verification requirements implemented, and we're pursuing, of course, more oversight when it comes to all of these areas. When it comes to the unemployment fraud, there's been an oversight investigation ongoing from Congress. With legislation we passed last year, there's going to be new accountability for fraud and improper payments when it comes to SNAP benefits, Medicare and Medi-Cal. You're seeing, Dr. Oz made some announcements about that recently. So we've already actually got a lot of oversight and accountability that has already happened and is in the works. But what I've also requested and what I'm working on now is doing a full-fledged audit of all spending in California so that we can identify exactly where the biggest problem areas are and then bring more rigorous oversight there.
When you say that, would that be at a federal level then? You're saying
That's
like
right.
a
Yes.
full, like, let's look at the guts of this thing instead of it being just a California driven quote unquote audit.
That's right.
Are you meeting any resistance to that in Congress?
Not really. I mean, even Ro Khanna came out and said that he wants to work with me on that
Okay.
because people have
Wow.
realized just how extreme the problem is.
Yeah, it's a huge concern, especially out here in California, where, we pay so much in taxes on a state level and then federal level as well. But California we pay a lot. And then it's so discouraging to hear. I mean, and frustrating too. Do you have any insight for listeners who, just the average mom who's listening to this and thinks, how the heck do they get away with losing just billions of dollars? What's the insight? How does that happen?
I think it's because we have no checks and balances in California. You have, Gavin Newsom and a total one party state, super duper majority in the legislature. And there's just no checks and balances. They think they can get away with anything. They think there'll be no consequences when they waste taxpayer dollars. They think they can just keep raising taxes higher and higher, increasing the budget more and more, rather than actually trying to spend the money that we're giving in the first place wisely. So that's why I've tried to use my position in Congress to restore some of those checks and balances, to bring some accountability that's sorely lacking at the state level.
Do you think that we can expect to see a real investigation, even if it's similar to the level of what's happening in Minnesota, even with all the flashes and storylines that are happening out there? But could we expect to see anything of that magnitude in California, which is also a sanctuary state? So they go hand in hand.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that we already have these efforts underway investigating fraud. There's already been a number of audits that have shown that fraud is absolutely rife in California, and so I think that not only should we, but we are will we have an obligation to go and use whatever tools we have to uncover the full extent of fraud, and then use whatever mechanisms we have in law to make sure that it comes to an end, and so that Californians can either get their tax dollars back or at least see them spent on something other than, benefiting criminals.
Yeah, you know what's interesting is I listened to Ben Shapiro was on Gavin Newsom's podcast, and I listened to it so no one else has to because it was. I will say this, and I was talking to my husband about it. Gavin Newsom is an interesting character because, as much as I'm very forthright that I think that he's a complete snake in the grass and he has destroyed California and will do so for the United States if given the opportunity, he is incredibly gifted with being very swift on his feet and being able to pivot questions. One of the questions Ben Shapiro had brought up was just the aspect of California being a sanctuary state. And when you have a sanctuary state, it's ripe for fraud and a lot of problems happen. And Gavin's response was that he cooperates with ICE. It's really not that bad. Do you agree with that?
No, it's totally false. Newsom has been the biggest cheerleader for the sanctuary state. And the entire point of the sanctuary state is to not cooperate with ICE, to refuse to, provide an orderly transfer of custody to someone who has committed a crime while they're in the state illegally. Now, there are a few exceptions to the sanctuary state law for particularly egregious kinds of crimes. So maybe that's what he's trying to refer to. But if he thinks that, those exceptions provide a good opportunity to cooperate, then why wouldn't he just want to get rid of the law altogether?
Yeah. Good question. Okay, let's go into a topic that I think is underreported and we need to be talking a lot more about. It's the California wealth tax. So, this is a 2026 ballot initiative. It's a one time, they say one time, okay? We're going to say that in quotes. You and I know how that goes. A 5% wealth tax on billionaires' net worth, but that also includes unrealized gains and can also include assets. It's retroactive to January 1st, 2026. It's backed by unions and progressive groups. I have listened to so many conversations by that wealthy people have had regarding this, and already we are seeing those billionaires start to pull out of California preemptively because of the chance of this passing. So I have a lot of questions.
Mm.
You've called this wealth tax unconstitutional and said it's already driving an exodus. So I want to ask you first, how real is this risk, and what are you hearing from business leaders since you're in Congress and obviously very well aware of the potential of this passing?
Yeah, it's a serious risk. It would be a total disaster for the state. It would probably cause our state's finances to utterly collapse. And I mean, it's important to recognize what a wealth tax is. This is totally unprecedented in this country. A handful of other countries have tried it, and they have all rescinded it
Mm,
because it was a disaster for them. So what a wealth tax is it says we're not just going to tax your income anymore. We're going to have come up with some number to represent your entire net worth, and then we're going to tax you, confiscate a percentage of that net worth. Now, it's problematic for a number of reasons. Number one, even billionaires oftentimes will not have the amount of liquid cash to actually pay that sort of thing. What you might see is, they have to liquidate their assets, they have to sell off shares, they have to, essentially end their companies and hurting all the employees there. So, what a lot of them have started doing is just, as you said, leaving the state altogether because
mhm.
the way they've written this up, even though it wouldn't pass until this coming November, they said we're going to apply it to anyone who was here at the start of this year, which is totally unconstitutional to do that retroactively. They've started leaving the state, taking with them, all the people that they employ, as well as the taxes that they do pay
Hmm.
on their income. And this is a big problem because our state, in some years, we get 50% of our tax revenue from the top 1% of earners. So if you see this mass exodus of these high net worth individuals, it literally will cause our state's finances to collapse.
Now, those who may not know as much as you just shared about this wealth tax may think, well, it's not that big of a deal. These are billionaires. It's just 5%. That's such a small number. These people have so much money, so much luxury. They live bougie lifestyles. They can afford it. We hear that fair share all the time. So, for those who may think that this really isn't going to affect me out here in California, it's just going to affect the upper echelon. What would you say to that?
Well, no, it's absolutely going to affect everyone because the mere threat of this being imposed has already caused all of these people simply to go and move to other states and bring their enterprises with them. So that means a loss of jobs. It means an enormous loss of tax revenue. It threatens California's ability to continue to lead in innovation because a lot of these people, are the people who started some of the, incredible companies and enterprises that we have in California. So it's the very identity of our state at issue. It's the very, structure of our state's finances at issue. It's the ability of our state to actually be able to provide, services that benefit people of all income levels. Because we're not going to have, the tax revenue to do it. So the entire thing, in addition to being unconstitutional, would be a disaster for all Californians. So I'm actually working on legislation in Congress to assure that this will not happen.
Oh, that's good to know. When should we expect to see that really start to make headlines, what you're working on?
We're going to release it probably within the next couple weeks here.
Okay, good. One other thing that I wanted to talk about with that, because I think that this is so the risk is so important and monumental that if this were to make it to the ballot, which I think most experts are saying it can. So if it makes it to the ballot, then we see it in November 2026. And we're going to talk about the MAP 50 redistricting and how that affects you. But if we see this on the ballot in November, I want to ask you if it were to pass, because it would put us in a crisis mode here in California, because we would have a bigger budget really than what we could what we could allocate, because now we've kicked all the billionaires out, or the billionaires have left. So what does that look like for us when it comes to taxes? Because I don't think that Gavin Newsom and those in charge are going to shrink the budget to compensate.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a really good point. What they'd probably try to do is raise everyone else who remains here, our taxes even more, which of course is going to cause even more people to leave, and so it's going to be this vicious cycle that simply will collapse the entire way our state's budget is set up, and so that's why we just need to nip this in the bud. We absolutely cannot allow it to happen. And by the way, you mentioned one time, quote unquote. That's absolutely correct. They're going to start by saying we're only imposing this one time on billionaires, but then they'll gradually lower the threshold for that until, the government just kind of has free reign to go in and seize anyone's assets that they want.
Yes. Okay. You know what's interesting too is in that interview I referenced, which everyone should watch. I know I jokingly said I watched it, so you don't have to, but you should watch it. The interview with Ben Shapiro on Gavin Newsom's podcast. Not that I want to prop his podcast up, but it was really fascinating to hear his take on, Ben was holding him to the fire on some issues with California, and Newsom's position on this wealth tax. I agreed with to a point, but this is how Gavin Newsom plays his hand. So Newsom says he's against this wealth tax. He doesn't think that it should pass. He'll use the bully pulpit against it, which I'm like, okay, I shockingly agree with Gavin on this. But he said it's because it would put California in an entirely different bracket for billionaires seeking to build businesses than anywhere else in the U.S., which leads me to think that if he were to find himself, oh, Lord have mercy, in the position of president, he wouldn't be opposed to this type of a structure of taxes.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And, Newsom always tries to have it both ways. So the moment that he thinks that something like this is in his own political self-interest, then I don't have any doubt he wouldn't hesitate to support it. And, he's presided over an increase of the state budget unlike anything we've ever seen. The budget has gone up to now $330 or so billion just since he took office. That's about a 50% increase. And yet, what exactly have we gotten in return for it? So if he can find a way where he thinks he can bring in more revenue wherever he is, and he can do it in a way that's politically advantageous, absolutely he will.
I think there's got to be some sort of law where if a government, even if it's a state level, can't balance the checkbooks and then make sure that there's a pure accounting, then they can't raise the budget. It just it seems insane that they're able to do that. Okay, let's talk about Prop 50. So the last time you and I were on, we really touched on this, kind of like we're doing with the wealth tax. We really focused on Prop 50, which was the redistricting out in California. So this, unfortunately, which you and I both knew, it was going to pass. And it passed 65 to 35 in 2025. The legislature took over map drawing from independent commission, which really is just Gavin Newsom, taking over and his crew. And This has been known as one of the worst gerrymanders in 50 years from a lot of experts who have looked at this from a true, pure analysis. And there is currently a DOJ lawsuit and GOP appeal to the Supreme Court that is pending on this redistricting. But these new maps, as you and I discussed, dramatically altered your district. And so I want to talk about that. What is the effects now that we are post Prop 50 here in California? And what does this look like on a grand scale?
Yeah, so you're right. Prop 50, enacted one of the worst gerrymanders in U.S. history, and Newsom explicitly said that the point was to make California a whole lot bluer and reduce the Republican congressional delegation to a mere 4 members out of 52. In the case of my district, he broke it into 6 different pieces. Mind you, this was after Newsom tried to defeat me in 2024. One of his own staff members ran against me, and I ended up winning by double digits. He failed miserably. So now he comes back and says, well, maybe if we just chop up the district, that'll be easier. Yeah, it's a very sad thing because I love my district. I have, I think, the most beautiful district in the state. So now I'm having to decide, okay, which of those 6 pieces am I going to stick with and as I run for reelection?
What does this mean in terms of those who are asking, well, now this has reshaped California's map. And so voting, like, what's the point of voting anymore? Because this has just thrown everything out the window and we don't even have true representation. What would you say to people who are wondering how this is going to affect the midterms out here in California, those who are running for reelection in November? What should we expect to see with this new map?
Well, it certainly makes the task harder for a lot of people, but people still get to vote. So, politicians can move the lines around on the map, but they can't take away your right to choose or to vote for the representative of your choice. So, the math has become harder in a lot of our districts, but that just means we're going to need to be that much more motivated to get people out to vote and to make sure that, we maintain the capacity to fight back against the insanity that Gavin Newsom is inflicting on our state.
This is where I think it goes hand in hand with the fraud. It's like yes and amen, and the fraud has to be looked at so we can make sure that the voting is fair and ethical and true. Do you expect the Supreme Court will intervene before all the filing deadlines and we go forward in November with all the voting?
I don't know. I'm proceeding on the assumption that that's not going to happen. That we're going to have to use this Prop 50 map just because time is starting to run out here with the filing deadline coming up in just a matter of weeks. So I'm glad the case is being litigated. I think that's perfectly appropriate, and the Supreme Court is going to probably be issuing some sort of decision in the coming weeks. But I think all of us need to prepare to deal with this gerrymandered map at least for 2026.
No, it's never tiring or never boring in California. I should say it is tiring, but it's not boring. Okay, as we wrap up real quick, and before we have you on next time, I want to ask you what your top priority is right now for federal oversight. I know we kind of discussed this, but if you had to give it to me in an elevator pitch, what you are watching and what we should be watching until we bring you on again to keep us up to speed.
Oh gosh, there's so much. I mean, when it comes to oversight, I think it's got to be the fraud. Like, this is an area where we can actually save our taxpayers tens of billions of dollars, if not more, as well as giving the nation a real perspective on what a Gavin Newsom run government is like.
Oh, it's so important, especially as we know he has his sights set on President of the United States of America. Lord have mercy. Kevin Kiley, it is always such a pleasure to have you on. Thank you for joining us again.
Of course. Thanks for having me.